Okay, we're also going to take a peek at the new fakes that are included with Visual Studio 2012. So stubs, mocks, shims, fakes, what do they all mean? And, whatever site you go to is going to give you a different definition. I'm just going to use stubs, and I'm going to use shims the way that Microsoft uses them in their documentation. And a stub is basically replacement code that is executed. It's going to act as the actual class, whereas a shim is replacement code that is executed at runtime. The shim is going to be slower because at runtime it's going to be listening to a call to some external thing you don't have control over. And when it gets a call, it's going to insert the shim and execute the code that you tell it to. Okay? Whereas the stub, you're going to define the stub and pass it in via its interface into the test method. Okay, and we're gonna take a peek at those. All right, it looks like I'm going to go at least 10 or so minutes over. Brianna, are you cool with that, or do you want to mention something and then let me just keep talking for another 10 minutes? Okay, thanks. All right, so I'm going to start with, and I'm going to gloss over the very simple basics of unit testing. I suspect most people hopefully are doing it. If you're not doing it, it can be overwhelming to try and figure out where to start. My recommendation is this. Just start with always adding unit tests for all your new code and add unit tests for all bugs. It'll get you started. Okay, so what am I going to be testing here? I'm going to test just the simple person and address class. And for starters, I'm going to keep them really simple. So we've got some properties like first name, last name, age. Each person can have a list of addresses associated to them. We can add addresses, remove addresses, and I've got a couple of other Boolean properties. Is this person a minor? Are they retired? That sort of thing. Okay? Now, normally what I do at this part of the demonstration would be I'd right-click in here and I'd say Generate Unit Tests, but that functionality is no longer in Visual Studio 2012. Not that big a deal to me. It really demoed nice, and it's only good kind of to basically get started, so not that big a deal. So rather than that, you're kind of stuck doing the old right-click. I'm going to add a project. It's going to be my unit test project. Name's not important. Click OK. Then I'm going to right-click on my project. I'm going to add a new unit test. And boom, there, I'm ready to start testing. Okay? Now, at the speed of light, I'm able to type in some tests that I already had. And we'll just take a quick peek at some really simple unit testing. Okay, so the key here is that all of my test methods have to have the test method attribute. That's the key. You can ignore the test categories and the priorities and owners and that sort of thing for now. But as you're running unit tests and automating unit tests, these categories and priorities are useful if you want to, say, only run priority 1 unit test on check-in and run all unit tests on my nightly build, something like that. So you can use categories and priorities for things like that. That's all I'm going to say on those. Okay, so simple unit test. We knew up a person, and what do I expect? I expect my first name to be null. Okay, very simple. Type of unit test. Or here I knew up a person, I give them an ID of 10, and I validate that when I run the test it is in fact 10. the Test Explorer on here a little bit too. Okay, so hopefully let's do a new test method, just the full name. So if we were to jump back to my code real quick, the person code, you'll notice that I have a full name property that just concatenates the last name and the first name, right? So I want to write a simple test method to do that. So I'm going to add my test method attribute. Full name test. I'm going to get a new person. I'm going to set his first name and last. Find what I'm expecting from my test result, or I could just hard code it in there. And then I'm going to do an assert. Assert, put in my expected value, and my target.full name. And I forget actually if the code was last name first or first name last, but let's just fire it off. I can run my test from here, or the new test runner over here. I'm going to build error. Assert.r equal, run it. Had a failure. How come? Let's check the output. And because it was star comma Tim was my full name, right? Great, I got a bug I can fix that didn't get out to the field, right? Run my test again, just validate that it's working. All right, perfect. Simple. Now, you might say, okay, clown, who writes classes that look like that? And the answer is pretty much nobody. So I want to throw a couple of slightly more complex scenarios at you. The first one I want to talk about is the stub. What I've done here is I've created a new constructor on the person. And presumably this person I'm going to need to be able to load and create, update, and delete and that sort of thing. And I'm using a data store. Okay, so rather than newing up a data store within this class, I'm going to use something called dependency inversion, a technique called dependency inversion or constructor injection, where I'm going to inject the dependency of this iPersist via the constructor. So what I'm saying is when you build the person, you give me something that supports this iPersist interface. Let's just take a really quick peek at that guy. And it's simple. I've got create, read, update, and delete method. And how does that work? So given a create, I'm just passing in a list of string name value pairs, right? So I'm going to give you a generic list of string key value pairs. And then I'll create something and I'm going to return an integer. So as if the database is creating the idea there is that the database creates a unique ID, I'm going to return it to you. All right, similarly, read. This time though, you give me an ID and I'm going to return you a string list of what it is I read. Okay, you can read the rest to presumably make a decent amount of sense.